And we begin this Saturday morning with a Fox News alert. Stunning new details revealed in Twitter's third release of files last night, showing unprecedented censorship at the highest levels.
Twitter Files 2 was on Thursday, Twitter Files 3 last night, and more is expected over the weekend as journalist Matt Taibbi revealing internal messages showing a relationship between Twitter and the FBI and communication leading up to the removal of former President Trump from the platform.
Kevin Cork joins us live in Washington, D.C. with more on this story. Kevin, what do we need to know?
Boy, this is just an incredible story, Will, Lisa, and Pete, and this will continue to unfold in the days and weeks ahead, so buckle up. We do know this, Lisa, that Twitter's former head of safety, a gentleman by the name of Yoel Roth, was seemingly meeting with the FBI on a weekly basis around the 2020 election. That according to the latest installment of the Twitter Files from journalist Matt Taibbi. And here's the central point. It brings into question the federal government's role in Twitter's silencing of conservative voices before and since that election. But not just the FBI, mind you. Nope, not just the Bureau. We're talking about interactions with the Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence as well. Here's a sample of the latest revelations by Taibbi about the period right before the 2020 election. Quote, during this time, executives were also clearly liaising with federal enforcement and intelligence agencies about moderation of election-related content. You got to read that twice to understand the magnitude of it. He continues, while we're still at the start of reviewing the Twitter Files, we're finding out more about these interactions every day. He then posted this. This post about the Hunter Biden laptop situation shows that Roth not only met weekly with the FBI and DHS, but with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And then there's this. Roth's report to FBI, DHS, and DNI is almost farcical in its self-flagellating tone. We blocked the New York Post story, then unblocked it, but said the opposite. Comms is angry. Reporters think we're idiots. In short, blank my life. And then there's this tweet as well from Taibbi, examining the entire election enforcement slack. We didn't see one reference to moderation requests from the Trump campaign, the Trump White House, or Republicans generally. We looked. They may exist. We were told they do. However, they were absent here. And then there's this tweet as well. He says, in another example, Twitter employees prepared to slap a mail-in voting is safe warning label on a Trump tweet about a postal screw-up in Ohio before realizing the events took place, which meant the tweet was factually accurate. Just incredible. And as you can well imagine, there's certainly more to come this weekend. And a reminder, if this seems like it's taking a while to unpack it all, that is in part, says Taibbi, because of the very dense nature of the material that they're actually reviewing. So he and Barry Weiss are asking for your patience. And again, as Will pointed out, Pete, there's more to come.
There is. It was teased inside these tweets last night. Barry Weiss and another reporter as well involved in future releases. Kevin Cork, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Another reporter is a guest on Fox and Friends Weekend. Quite frequently, it's Michael Schellenberger, who's covered climate change on various occasions here on Fox and Friends. He'll be reporting over the weekend as well. So I think my biggest takeaway between Twitter Files 2 and Twitter Files 3 is this. As we learned earlier in the week that Twitter was shadow banning various conservatives, including, for example, our friend Dan Bongino. And as we learned last night, Twitter was in direct coordination in weekly meetings with the entire national intelligence and law enforcement apparatus. That Twitter, in effect, was working as an arm of the Democratic National Committee. It was doing the bidding of turning down conservative voices, and we're going to presume, at the very least, leaving up voices who they found acceptable. But there's one more extension. They were also working as an arm of the national intelligence arm of the United States government, which means, if we're doing logical extension, the national security apparatus, the FBI, the DNI, was working by extension as an arm of the DNC.
Yeah, which feels like an extension of what we saw in 2016 with the dossier, with all the charges brought against the team who was then a candidate, and then in the White House. These Twitter files, it'll be interesting to see the next couple as well, because they're moving toward January 6th and January 8th when Donald Trump was kicked off of Twitter. And all of this almost feels like a predicate. They were building whatever case that needed to be made to remove a sitting head of government. And they refer to that. And when you read these tweets in this thread, how ad hoc the nature was, an individual tweet comes in, okay, let's Google it and see if it's true or not true. And then somebody's deciding, okay, suppress it, keep it. It's just amazing. And when you consider the fact that 99% of Twitter employees are Democrats, when you look through their political donations, there was only one lens through which they looked at the world. The DNI is in charge of all the intelligence agencies. These texts are showing, or these internal Slack messages, that there were weekly meetings. And the DNI and the FBI were vague, it says, but clear enough that when the Hunter Biden story came up, Joe Biden in the New York Post, Twitter knew exactly what to do with it.
Well, see, and Pete, to your point, that's what worries me the most, because it's not just Twitter, right? Think about all the companies across the country where are infiltrated by leftists like this, who don't believe in free speech, who don't believe in these things that make America great, that make us a constitutional republic. And you could go back to 2016 to look at the problem with all of this. You know, Donald Trump did a little too well with Facebook. Remember, the former vice president of Facebook, Andrew Bosworth, had said that Donald Trump won in 2016 because he was so good at utilizing Facebook, because he was so good at utilizing these social media, aspects, right? He was able to reach the people. He was able to circumvent mainstream media to reach the people. And so after that, they dialed up the censorship.
Yep.
They said,
Can't
we have to
happen
stop
again.
this man. We have to stop his ability to reach people directly. And that's when it was the Cambridge Analytica stuff. That was when Russia, had swayed the election with these Facebook ads, when they spent like a nominal amount of money that wouldn't have swayed an electorate anyways, right? That's when the lies started. And you can also go back to 2016 and looking at the way the FBI, Obama's FBI and Obama's DOJ, just completely dismantled the way we do things in America, right? They railroaded Donald Trump. They weaponized government against Donald Trump. And then it was on, where we sort of eroded these checks and balances, or eroded, the equal justice system and also free speech.
No doubt.
And that's when it all unraveled.
And you pointed out, Pete, the FBI's influence on Twitter and probably other big tech corporations as well over the Hunter Biden story. But it was much bigger than that because they continued to meet. And in fact, the FBI and the DNI met with Twitter so often that this is the type of messages that were taking place inside on their internal Slack system. This is Joel Roth. If there is a man behind the curtain, it probably is Joel Roth on the censorship regime. He said this inside of Twitter. It happens. I'm a big believer in calendar transparency, but I reached a certain point where my meetings became very interesting to people, and there weren't meeting names generic enough to cover. In response to that, an anonymous staffer said, very boring business meeting. That definitely is not about Trump. Wink. Yoth responds, pretty much. And then he says, definitely not meeting with the FBI, I swear. And you see, by the way,
there you go.
He talks about his calendar. He's meeting with them weekly.
Yeah. And there was the whole thing, the way they knew exactly what they were doing was shady. They couldn't even make it public inside the company, and so they joked about it in humor, gallows humor. Here we are in this situation where we're talking about Trump and we're meeting with intelligence agencies. We can't hide it. And now they can't hide it at all because Elon Musk owns the company.
And it's also bigger than the Twitter files as well. I mean, you had the Intercept article really unearthing all these documents that the reporter looked at in this coordination between various government agencies and big tech, and various big tech companies outside of just Twitter as well. And even pointing out that all of this goes back to 2018 when DHS sort of ramped up their interference in our elections and quote unquote disinformation, which is really just the truth.
and on various subjects as well. So these meetings took place. Various tweets were flagged. Various accounts were flagged. One of those that came up was from an account tweeted by Republican Georgia Congressman Jody Heiss, who joins us now this morning. So as part of Twitter Files 3, Congressman, you saw yours come up, and apparently yours was tagged after some deliberation in Twitter with one of what they call their soft interventions, which I think just means you got a warning label tagged on to your tweet. What is your takeaway as you see how this was unfolding inside of Twitter?
Yeah, listen, we knew this was going on. There was no question our Twitter account was facing some unprecedented lack of reach. I mean, we could see it. We didn't know what was going on. But look, Jack Dorsey, the former CEO, testified before Congress that in no uncertain terms, Twitter was not shadow banning conservatives, nor were they using their algorithms to somehow stifle conservative speech. That's what he testified under oath. And now we know absolutely those were false statements. They were indeed absolutely coming after conservative speech, targeting and censoring the reach of conservative speech.
Yeah, here's the tweet that got you in trouble. According to this, is Matt Taibbi shared a portion of it. He said, "Here a label is applied to Georgia Republican Congressman Jody Hice for saying, 'Say no to big tech censorship, and mailed ballots are more prone to fraud than in-person balloting.'" It's just common sense. At which point we showed the post already. Twitter went easy on you, saying soft intervention. They're worried about wah-wah censorship. So they're really more worried about how they're viewed than whether or not your tweet is true.
Absolutely. And listen, what is more basic than that tweet? I mean, there's no reason in the world for them to come after that, nor any other conservative speech. Look, they're an organization that promotes so-called free speech. And this is something that applies to all Americans, the First Amendment, and we have no setup whereby a handful of big tech elites can determine by their own choice what is acceptable and non-acceptable speech. This was nothing but absolute censorship. And look, there's got to be accountability.
Congressman, can I ask you?
There's going to be, but this is unacceptable, and it cannot go untouched.
Well, you know, Congressman, I think the bigger concern is that this is reflective of a growing percentage of Americans. This censorship and this no longer believing in free speech. I mean, we know Twitter was controlled by leftists. So how do you tackle that problem with just changing minds in America about speech?
And this is a disturbing movement that's taking place, right? We have a movement in this country towards socialism, towards communism, really, an attempt to silence any voices that are contrary to the government speech. And in this case, we have a revolving door between Twitter, the DNC, federal government,
yes,
and they in turn are dictating what news is going to be heard by New York media powerhouses or whatever, and they in turn influence the entire country, what's going to be allowed to be shown and viewed to the American people or not. And it is un-American. This is anti-First Amendment and extremely disturbing, but that is a powerful movement that is taking grip in American culture today, that if you do not agree with the radical left wing, you will be silenced, you will be canceled, you will be totally put aside. And we've got to stop this. We've got to stop it now.
No doubt, Congressman. I think the cultural movement that you and Lisa talk about is extremely concerning. But as you said, what's also more concretely disturbing in the moment is the revolving door between law enforcement, Twitter, and the actions that therefore were allowed with government coordination. We're glad your voice was free and clear this morning on Fox and Friends. Thanks for getting up with us.
Thank you, Congressman.
Appreciate it.
I think it's worth pointing out, by the way, as well. There's an account named Ian Miles Chong. He's been very active in the Twitter Files release. He asked Elon Musk, hey, has there been any political candidates, U.S. or anywhere else, where shadow banning was enforced to actually affect the outcome of an election? Mm-hmm. And Musk responded quickly and shortly.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
While they were running for office or seeking re-election.
Let me read that one. I got that part of the prompter.
Well, and Lisa, you're in for Rachel today, but she'd be jumping off the couch on that one, too. I mean, she talks about, as a political spouse, how difficult it is to win, let alone win when it's all stacked against you in the digital world.
Well, and too, I mean, and you can kind of see why there's been all these attacks on Elon Musk. Right? They want this censorship. They want this power. And Elon Musk threatens that, as we've seen with his desire to get all this information out to the light.
I did not kill myself, says Elon Musk.
Oh, I thought you were like...
No, that's what he said in the thread. He said, I've increased my security. And
let's not
fingers crossed, no Jeffrey Epstein.
I didn't kill myself.
All right, we'll have much more on this story throughout the morning, and I'm sure in the days ahead as we see future releases on the Twitter Files. But still ahead, welcome to New York. Just one day after a man was caught on camera hitting a stranger with a bat, guess what? He's back on the streets. The latest lap lapse in our justice system.
Nice. Plus, it's the battle of our nation's best. The 123rd Army-Navy game is today, and Joey Jones is in Philly for all of it. Joey, good morning.
Hey guys, we're here at Lincoln Financial Field. Listen, this is the 123rd annual or 123rd ever meeting of these two teams, and talking about something that's hard to win. It's going to be a hard-fought game today, I'm telling you.
Fox News alert, a U.S. soccer journalist is dead at the World Cup. Grant Wahl dying suddenly yesterday, leaving the sports world stunned.
So strange. Now his family is calling foul, saying he was healthy and the subject of death threats in Qatar.
Marianne Rafferty joins us now. Marianne.
Good morning. Shocking news out of Qatar as journalist Grant Wahl suddenly died last night while covering the World Cup. Wahl's agent confirming the tragic news, saying Wahl was in the press box in the final minutes of the match between Argentina and the Netherlands when he went into acute distress. The agent also saying Wahl had been feeling unwell during the match and had complained of trouble sleeping. Medical personnel tried performing chest compressions after he collapsed. It wasn't immediately clear if he died at the stadium or in transport to the hospital. Grant's brother, Eric, says he suspects foul play after Wahl was briefly detained for wearing this rainbow pride shirt during the U.S. match against the Netherlands last month. Homosexuality is criminalized in Qatar, where many fans and players have also faced scrutiny for their support of gay rights. Wahl's brother saying, quote, "I'm gay. I'm the reason he wore the rainbow shirt to the World Cup. My brother was healthy. He told me he received death threats. I do not believe my brother just died. I believe he was killed, and I just beg for any help." And a spokesperson for the State Department says the agency is engaged with Qatari officials to find out exactly what led to Wahl's death. Grant's wife, Dr. Celine Gounder, saying, "I am so thankful for the support of my husband, Grant's soccer family, and so many friends who've reached out tonight. I'm in complete shock." And the U.S. men's national team saying Grant made soccer his life's work, and we are devastated that he and his brilliant writing will no longer be with us. Wahl was covering his 8th World Cup at the time of his death. His sports journalism career spanning more than 20 years and included more than 6 years with Fox Sports. He was just 48 years old. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Marianne.
Crazy story.
Strange story.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to turn now to a few additional headlines, including this. A neighbor of the home where 4 University of Idaho students were murdered nearly 4 weeks ago now says they heard a scream on the night of the attack, saying, quote, "I didn't think anything of it. After what happened, I've definitely had second thoughts. Maybe it was not a party sound." Tips also still pouring in on potential sightings of the white Hyundai? Yeah, Elantra. Police say could hold critical information on the deadly attack. Police are also warning the internet sleuth community to stop spreading misinformation, as they describe it, about the case, or possibly face criminal charges. And the suspect in this baseball bat attack in New York City is released on just $7,500 bail 1 day after his arrest. So you do this, 1 day later, you're out. Kareem Azizi is accused of smashing a man in the head, and we've got it on video, following a verbal dispute. The suspect's girlfriend paying his bail, which was set far lower than recommended. He's facing multiple charges related to the attack. His next court appearance is set for Monday. And those are your headlines. Not good ones.
No.
Are they just now back to the Idaho story? Is that neighbor just now realizing that there was a scream, or maybe that's just coming out as part of the investigation? It's just stunning to me that 4 weeks later all we have is a white vehicle maybe and a neighbor that says they heard a scream.
Yeah,
Well,
it really is crazy.
It's also just so strange. I mean, obviously someone took an enormous amount of risk to go into a house full of people to different floors as well.
Yeah.
So,
It doesn't seem like the type of crime you could just walk away from without leaving a mountain of evidence that leads investigators to your trail.
A month later, here we are.
A month later, here we are.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Meanwhile, Brittany Griner has been released, of course, from Russian custody, and she's going through a prisoner reintegration program in Texas. Obviously, people have questioned the value of this prisoner trade from the perspective of the United States of America. Victor Bout, known as the mercenary of death, who people have said has armed the world's worst throughout the past several decades, from African child soldiers to Mexican drug cartels, was exchanged for celebrity basketball player Brittany Griner. And I think that everybody can take a moment and go, happy that an American was returned home. But why was it that an American, at least one American, was left behind? Paul Whelan, a Marine, still in custody in Russia.
Yeah, I mean, you said it exactly right. Two things can be true at once. You can be happy that she's back and acknowledge it was a horrible deal with long-term implications that set a precedent that we make these kind of trades. But we already knew that. I mean, look at the Obama-Bergdahl trade for the 5 Taliban leaders who are now in charge in Afghanistan. I mean, the world is on notice that at least when this administration is in charge, they're willing to make really bad deals for effectively PR purposes. And then also trading someone who is of real use to Vladimir Putin. Like, this guy knows how to get around different blockades that are had against countries from embargoes or whatever. So he can go back to his best trade, which is trafficking in arms around the world, to include wanting to kill Americans. That's why he was initially arrested. He was going to sell like 800 Stinger missiles to a company, to someone who wanted to target Americans. Terrible deal.
Well,
bad all the way around.
His nickname was Merchant of Death. So, I mean, like, that right there kind of tells you a lot. And look at that stash. So, but, look, when he was convicted in 2011 of terrorism, to your point, he had $20 million of weapons with him, surface-to-air missiles that he was planning on selling, could shoot down American helicopters. And this is a bad deal, right? We traded a basketball player for a man like this who has caused death and destruction that has earned him the nickname a Merchant of Death. But Randy Weingarten basically, gave it away. Remember the American Federation for Teachers? She put out this tweet saying that Griner was black and gay. And if you look at the list of priorities for the left, the boxes that they check, that meets them, right? So if you're in the military, like Paul Whelan, that doesn't cover it, right? That doesn't elevate you to the status of needing to be released. And what's interesting is NBC originally put out a story saying that it could have been either or. And they chose her.
I thought
instead.
that wouldn't surprise me.
They corrected it, but they didn't really give a lot of information
John
about why.
Bolton that came out and said that this deal was on the table for Victor Boot and Paul Whelan during the Trump administration. And they didn't do it because it was such a bad deal, even in that circumstance.
Much less for Brittany Griner.
Exactly right. Much less for
Well,
Brittany Griner.
to your point, Lisa, I think it is an actually very, very valid point to say what drives the Biden administration is wins through PR, wins through the cause celeb, wins through the lens of Twitter. And Brittany Griner was a win through the lens
That's what I was trying to think of, but it's
Twitter.
6:30. Give me an hour. I'll be in the game.
To bolster the point you've been making, Pete, former DA agent Tom Pasquarello said the following when it comes to Victor Boot. He said, I'm kind of in disbelief. Now, this is a guy who was part of, I believe, the team that arrested Victor Boot in the past. He said, it's kind of in disbelief that someone with the potential to orchestrate arms deals that can kill Americans anywhere in the world will be traded for a prisoner. Any prisoner, I guess he's referencing at that point. I think this sends a terrible message that the U.S. will negotiate, that the U.S. will make concessions, and that if an American is held overseas, there's always the potential that the U.S. will acquiesce to the demands of people like Vladimir Putin and bail them out.
Doesn't this show how weak Joe Biden is? This is all you could do for the Merchant of Death, a guy who was convicted of terrorism with $20 million of weapons. This is all you could do, is trade a WNBA player for him? Like, why couldn't have we gotten both? Right? Like, if this was Trump, he probably would have done so. If this is the Republican president, they would have done so. But Joe Biden is weak. I mean, there's a reason why Putin invaded Ukraine in the first place under this man. There's a reason why the Taliban, basically stuck it to Joe Biden as the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Joe Biden is weak. This is a terrible deal because he's a pathetic coward, and everyone knows it.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything that you said, and that's what our enemies understand about him as well. And therefore, a deal like this is on the table, and we actually take it, and they laugh over in the Kremlin.
And they were, by the way. There are reports in Russian media that they're laughing at this deal.
As they should, to be honest,
So are we, unfortunately.
All right, still ahead, border crisis crackdown. As gotaways at our southern border reach historic highs, Texas is taking matters into its own hands. The new unit taking down smugglers. Fox News Alert, Part 3 of the Twitter files, revealing executives met with the FBI and DHS on a weekly basis around the 2020 election. In a series of tweets, Matt Taibbi writes, Policy Director Nick Pickles is asked if the marketing department should say Twitter detects misinformation through human review and partnerships with outside experts. Pickles is told to say partnerships. Not sure we describe the FBI and DHS as experts. was the quote. Here to react, Harmeet Dillon, CEO of the Center for American Liberty and candidate for RNC chair. More on that in just a moment here with Harmeet. But let's start with this topic, if we might. It's great to see you this morning. Thanks for being with us. What do you take away from this coordination between the FBI and Twitter?
Well, I'm not surprised by it because actually we filed 2 different lawsuits over the last several years over this issue of the censorship of Twitter and how Twitter's censorship doesn't line up with its own terms of service. I suspected that something was up, like many other conservative activists over time. I've also seen my engagement go up and down on a large account with several 100,000 followers, and I suspected it was because of political suppression. We learned it was true when I represented a client, Rogan O'Handley. Judicial Watch sent a Public Records Act request to the state of California and found that there are thousands of documents proving that California coordinated with Twitter and other social media companies to do exactly this. Now we've learned through Eric Schmidt's lawsuit and other AGs that the federal government coordinated as well. So from Fauci to the FBI and probably other federal agencies we don't know about yet, it is clear that this has been happening, and in my opinion as a First Amendment lawyer, it is a violation of the First Amendment for our government to collude and coordinate with private entities to suppress the speech of American citizens for political or any purposes, and it's outrageous. And so far, the courts have been resistant to allow these claims. We have one case pending in the Ninth Circuit right now after argument last week. But it is very important that all Americans realize the threat that is posed by big tech companies, which are now effectively the place that most of our discourse and our information even is received and takes place, are affecting and not just affecting and suppressing, but manipulating what we see. So we need to know more about this. There needs to be litigation. And in my opinion, there really needs to be accountability, including for these tech executives lying to Congress about what they did.
In fact, let's bore into that, Harmeet. Here is Jack Dorsey before Congress saying they do not, in fact, shadow ban conservatives.
Does Twitter censor the content of its users? Does it hide what it would consider inflammatory comments, whether they be social or political?
Absolutely not.
Has Twitter ever been involved in shadow banning?
We do not shadow ban according to political ideology or viewpoint or content, period. Are we doing something according to political ideology or viewpoints? And we are not, period. We do not look at content with regards to political viewpoint or ideology.
Are you censoring people?
No.
Twitter shadow banning prominent Republicans. It's bad. Is that true?
No.
You know, Harmeet, as I listen to that, and I'm thinking it through the lens of an attorney, as you would as well, my suspicion is Jack is playing word games in a lot of those questions. He's wondering, or he's trying to manipulate the definition of a shadow ban. But he was asked that question in many different environments, in many different ways, and he was unequivocal. We do not do what we now know they were doing, shadow banning conservatives. What type of accountability for those lies is possible?
Well, I mean, you know, you could have Congress call him back and, you know, maybe pursue some form of contempt or criminal referral for that, for lying under oath. Not only are they trying, the one I'm listening carefully, not only is he attempting to sort of parse the term of shadow ban, but maybe also parse the term of conservative. You know, conservative actor James Woods was in the Taibbi drop #1 and also the drop #3 yesterday. I don't think there's any question that they widely banned, shadow banned, deboosted, censored, even deplatformed conservatives specifically on the basis of their conservative ideology, affiliation, and viewpoint. And so I don't know if the feckless Congress, even on my side of the aisle, is going to be willing to do something about this, but they really should. And I'm expecting to see a flood of litigation as well.
Well, on that note, Harmeet, you're running for chairwoman of the RNC against Ronna McDaniel. You know, on this issue and many others, what type of change could you effectuate? What type of accountability could you, and what type of wins could you bring to the Republican Party?
Well, what I know is we've lost over the last 3 election cycles and 2 Georgia runoffs, and the losses are unacceptable, and our base is really fed up with it, and frankly are not turning out at the polls because of that. Excuse me. The RNC plays a very important role overall to raise money, to set the message, set the tone, to train our volunteers and our staff to get out the vote. And I think that we're not using the most modern methods to do that. What I know is that if we don't do something differently than we did in the last 6 years, we're not going to win in 2024. I'm hearing loud and clear from thousands of voters that our party is demanding change. I hear it, and I'm stepping up to provide that change. So I'll be rolling out my platform in coming days and weeks.
Well, Harmeet, we look forward to hearing more about that, having you on this program, and I'm sure many others here at Fox, and hearing your plan for the future of the RNC. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Up next,
a tale of two fails. A former Afghan Special Forces commando who worked with the U.S. military in Afghanistan spent months evading the Taliban after our nation's disastrous withdrawal. But when he finally made it to the United States, he was arrested. Abdul Wasi Safi was trying to reach his brother who lives in Houston after being granted a visa as a translator. But when he reached our southern border, he was detained for failing to present himself at a port of entry. Abdul's brother, Sami Safi, joins us now. Sami, thanks for being here. First of all, let's start with the Afghanistan side of it. So your brother worked with U.S. troops. Would he have been eligible, like so many others, to be evacuated to the United States, do you believe?
Absolutely. The reason why I say that is because he was working with Afghan in cooperation with American Special Forces, elite forces. They were going after enemy of freedom of Afghanistan and freedom of this country. They were fighting alongside American Special Forces, going after the enemy that basically caused 9/11 and situations like that in America. They definitely deserved to be evacuated.
So, Sami, your brother was one of those left behind by our disastrous withdrawal. So he had to fight to find his way to get to this country, to claim asylum. He eventually made his way to Mexico. And it's a longer story here, but he made his way to Mexico, and he worked with a smuggler, with other migrants who was able to get him to the southern border. What did he want to do when he got to the southern border, like millions of others have tried to do?
So he basically flee Afghanistan to Pakistan, and from Pakistan he was issued a humanitarian visa from Brazil. Upon arriving to Brazil, he was treated as a terrorist, even though he had all his documents to prove who he was. He was treated as a terrorist, and he flee from Brazil. Every country that he arrived, we have all the evidence and documents that they were giving him exit paper, telling him, "You're not welcome here. You have certain amount of time to exit this country." Sure. So upon arriving to the border, United States border, he found himself in between approximately 100 other migrants that were trying to reach United States. And he was separated from all those other people that entered United States. And they basically processed those people differently than they put him in process. He was interrogated by special agents, questioning him if he was a terrorist or if he had any ties with any terrorist groups in Afghanistan or who he was. He provided his documentations, his certificates, his work ID, his every paperwork that he had, he provided to the investigator. Even after that, he was transferred to U.S. Marshal for unknown reason.
So when people come to our border illegally, their claim is asylum, and most people are released inside that claim. Yet your brother, who claimed asylum for legitimate reasons, fleeing the Taliban, is currently detained.
Let's put it this way. Because of the wrong policies, because of the failure of this administration, my brother had to go through all this. Because of the withdrawal of Afghanistan, from Afghanistan, after the withdrawal, basically he had to go and hide in places that I cannot describe it. And after that, they created a WhatsApp group to inform one another
Sure.
to basically avoid being captured by Taliban. The Taliban that Biden administration handed them over to. So they try to avoid Taliban, and he found out that basically half of those people were killed.
Yeah.
In that chat group, half of those people were killed, and he basically found himself no other option but to flee Afghanistan.
No, terrible policies have consequences and human consequences. Sami Safi, thank you for your time. Keep us posted on your brother Abdul. God bless him. Hopefully
Thank you
he's released
for
soon.
The community. And also, I want to inform all the others that are watching this. We created a supporting page, Justice for Wasi.com. So please visit that page. And also, I truly appreciate everyone for supporting the veterans and active members of military who came across to support us and supporting my brother and his services.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. You're a patriot. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, still ahead.